Invited me to talk about this, and I come from PLTS, which is a Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary in Berkeley. It's one of the 7 Lutheran seminaries where we train pastors and deacons and people who want to study theology. And now we have a unique niche. We teach also community organizing. So we have a bunch of students who never want to become a pastor or deacon, but they want to do something in the world, in a society. And our focus in every course is we have a nexus focus, which means we want to attend to issues of race, class, gender, earth. And so racism is part of our thinking with every course, which challenges us because it's not always we're not used to thinking of from that lens necessarily when you come from a white background, as I do. I come from a very white background. So why is this topic pertinent? It's because how we think of other is part of when we think of how we think of racism and how do we think of other. And when we think of Luther and the Jews, or Luther and Jewish people, Luther and Jewish religion, we are looking at one case of how people have thought of the other and what we can learn from their mistakes. So I prepared a few slides and I could share some of those points with you. And then, did you say, Haley, that we have about 20 minutes, or how long should I forgot now.
Yeah,
About
that's
20
okay.
minutes?
I think if you talk for, 20, 25 minutes, and if there are questions at that point, that would be perfect.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
thanks.
So I'll pull up my slides here, and during the slides, feel free to stop me also, and I can also go through this pretty quickly, and then we can talk. Can I share the screen?
You should be able to.
Okay, here we go. Presentation. Okay, can you see that? Okay. All right. So. Okay. I am really sorry about this. There will be interruptions, and I do not know what to do about that. I'm just gonna stay here and keep talking, and people will go by, and we'll just play ball like that.
That's okay with us. Yeah, we're so flexible.
Yeah.
Don't even worry.
I'm a mom. I can just ignore what's around me, right?
Yeah.
So this is a very live topic, Luther and the Jews. So I just want to focus on Luther and Jewish people and Jewish religion, and not to use the word racism, anti-racism too much while I talk, but just start with saying that a rise of anti-Semitism is quite concerning. A rise of anti-Semitic crimes around the world, in Europe, in the places where we know the most horrific crimes against the Jewish people have happened. It is in those places also where we see an alarming rise of neo-Nazism, white supremacist behavior, and anti-Semitism. So this is a very important topic, not only for Lutherans, but anybody who considers Christian faith important for themselves. And Luther is a Christian teacher with tremendous impact. And we see him as a voice who did not invent anti-Jewish thoughts, but inherited and translated and conveyed forward thoughts that are really toxic and harmful amidst all the good things he taught. So he's one window to a bigger issue. So that's my lens, thinking of the importance of this topic from the premise of why do we have to consider the dangers of anti-Semitism today, and Luther as a window to that question. It's a complicated story. There is no straight path forward, and we could say that Luther is a good window. Heiko Obermann, one of the most famous Luther scholars, has said that the terrible tragedy of the relationship between the Jews and Christians in the whole world history can be studied in concentrated form in the history of this one man. Austin Saken, who is a Jewish scholar, has said that Luther's anti-Jewish writings belong in the front row of treatises, speeches, and sermons delivered against the Jews in all of church history. So there's a reason why there's a lot of attention into what he said, because of the power of his writings, and his audience. His audience was just vast. Shava Frankel Goldschmidt, also a Jewish scholar, has said that in order to understand Luther, we need to also understand that the entire society in which Luther lived believed that the Jews were wicked, that they were tools of Satan, just as they believed in personified evil, demons, and Satan and witches. Then thinking of, it's helpful to understand where was Luther coming from? How did his world look like in terms of who were the other? The only other in terms of communities of people who practiced not Christian faith were Jewish people. And they were always the fragile community that was the minority, but they had rights to stay in places depending on the will of the Christian rulers. Many cities in Europe in Luther's time had no Jewish people. They had never met a Jew. Jew was an abstract concept. Germany, or German-speaking lands, were one of the few places in whole Europe where Jewish people still could find a place to live and right to practice. When we look at the 16th century, there we have numbers of how many people are we really talking about. We're really talking about a minority, but minority that was significant. About 0.2% of the population being Jews. Look at the expulsions from 12th century on. Countries like France, England, Spain, they had expulsed all of the Jewish people. But you see, the expulsions happened several times because Jewish people didn't disappear. They either came back, or there were times changed that there was permission to come back. But anyway, from 12th century on, there were efforts to expulse. Thank you, gracias. And then Germany had smaller expulsions, and this was surprising to me when we got into this topic, that let's say from 14th century on, every major town had its own expulsion that's been recorded. So what's going on there? That Christians frequently persecute Jews in 16th century world, in the lands where Jews had still permission to at least travel through or find at least a temporary home. Well, that's not. Why is that doing that? My computer is giving me a little hard time here. We know for a fact that in Luther's lifetime, and he knew of what had happened in the previous centuries, there were many narratives of Jewish people being burned, harassed, persecuted. Christians told stories, nightmare stories about what the Jewish people do to Christian children if you let them uncontrolled. This was the most blasphemous idea, that Jewish worshiping religious communities would find Christian children and mutilate them and use their blood and blaspheme Christian, the host. The element used was Lord's Supper. So if you spread this kind of fear among people who don't know who Jews are, what does it mean to be Jewish? If you don't know any Jewish people, you learn legends of the most dangerous kind of people. You can get a little bit in the mindset that how normal, good people could turn into persecutors of their Jewish neighbors. The Christian mob, what happened on January 6th, we saw the danger of mob that is ill-informed and fueled. It's possible to happen today, and it was a scary reminder of the power of the mob. And Luther writes about that in some of his treatises about that be careful with the mob, that be careful how you lead people, because there's something in human nature that we can be easily excited to rage and do something with that rage. And there is, so I would want to point out this, that we can talk later, the factor ignorance plays in this. If you don't know the other, it is more feasible for you to believe lies and consider the other your enemy. And when you use religion and religious practice as a tool in spreading lies, it's puts a different burden on those who are religious or religious leaders in doing all in their power to diffuse lies and misconceptions. Money matters, money talks, right? When you think of politics today, when we look at when there is something icky going on, when you follow the money, it's amazing what you find and what you can do. The same is true with the lives of Jewish people in Luther's world. We see that while Jews were allowed to practice certain professions like banking and migrant business that served Christian communities, sometimes Christian landowners and business folks, some negotiations took place that led into sudden expulsions of entire Jewish communities from a given land. And when you look deeper at what actually happened, and typically these expulsions were accompanied by blasphemy and horrible rumors about what some Jewish person had done, typically involving a violent act. But when you look deeper, there was always something to do with money, that some Christian landowners or business people, they benefited from usurping the possessions of the Jews in the land and expulsing them. Usury was used, Luther writes a lot about usury, and this is where Luther became more famous first on his writings about the Jewish people, because it was okay for Jews to practice money lending with interest. And Luther, who was concerned about poverty of people, he was very concerned about people being poor and buying indulgences or putting their money in places other than buying food for their children. He was very angry of any practice of lending money for high interest. And some of the interest rates were really enormous. So he was right in underscoring that. But because most of the money lenders were Jews got more of the blame in that. So the word Jew appears in those writings a lot. There's an image you can see often if you look at medieval or Reformation era images, you see a Jewish person with a money purse, coins. That profession was associated with Jews. So was anybody protecting Jewish persons? There were imperial laws. This tells us that there were imperial laws, the fact that there were imperial laws and papal laws saying explicitly, don't harm Jewish persons. You have no right to take their possessions. You have no right to burn Jewish families. That tells us that that was happening, that even the emperor and even the Pope had to repeatedly say something that don't do that, it's wrong. And then there were territorial laws that had some fluctuation on how different areas dictated what rights do the Jewish people have and what they don't have. And there were special Jewish laws about that. And these laws could change quite randomly. And these laws controlled where Jewish people can live, where they can travel, what taxes they pay, what basic rights they have. And I have a kind of a sad and interesting example of that from a more modern time. When Finland became independent in 1917, we had a small Jewish community in Finland, and some of the Jews had served in Finnish army, fighting the Russians and the Germans. But then when Finland became independent, a question came up that what do we do with our Jewish people? And some people did not think that the Jewish people should be citizens. It's mind-boggling, but it tells us how, and when we think of who has the right for citizenship today in this country, I'm an immigrant, I got my citizenship. And you know what I was told when I got my citizenship in Philadelphia? You deserve that, unlike those others. And this is a direct quote. You deserve this, unlike those others. And he was referring to people in a waiting room who most of them were persons of color. And I remember how intimidated I felt in that room. The person used the word deportation twice. And I'm thinking, how terrified would I be if I wasn't here by choice? Anyhow, don't get me started on that. The power of propaganda, and this gets us more to today, that how we talk and make fun of the other, it actually matters. What jokes we allow in our dinner tables and what we don't, it actually matters, because our children are listening, and people are testing kind of the boundaries, often through jokes and what radical things we can say. Oops, I just lost my power for a second there. Okay, Jews were portrayed by Christian authors and painters as lusty, fleshy, ignorant, conniving, not trustworthy. They were stubborn, ignorant, greedy, and nasty. Now, why is my computer keep going off for me? Sorry, guys. I'm having techie difficulties here. How is this possible? Okay. This is one image. Very often we see a Jewish person portrayed with a hat. There were certain symbols that Christian artists had to indicate, even in paintings, that who is a Jewish person. And I talk about the hat in a second. Um, People who study art can look at how are the features portrayed, and the outfit and the gestures, and if there's money in a picture, and what is often a negative image that's portrayed. Here we see a Jewish person with the pointy hat and a bigger nose with Satan. Uh, yeah. Then let's talk about Christians. For Christians, in their theological imagination and what they learned from their pastors, preachers, teachers, that Jews represent the Jewish people represent futile law obedience. They are stubborn deniers of Christ. They believe in that you save yourself by your works righteousness, which is anti Protestant Christian teaching. Here we have an image of, you can already identify the Jewish persons here are the mean looking guys, right? And they are not very nice with Jesus. And that's the image for Christians in Luther's world, that the Jewish people are danger to us Christians because they killed our Christ. Holy Week, which we just celebrated, and Passover, Holy Week has been historically a dangerous week for for Jewish persons in Luther's world and Middle Ages, because that's when the mob usually went nuts and did horrible things for the Christ killers, as they called Jews. At the same time, Christians have revered the Hebrew Bible and the faith ancestors there. Luther loved the people in the Hebrew Bible. They were the best Christians, he thought, or vice versa. Christians who really get it are the best Jews. He was kind of kinky like that. He was mixing things a little bit. I'm almost done here, getting to Luther here a minute. In Luther's world, it was okay to be anti-Jewish. It was okay and actually preferred. It was normal. Nobody would think twice if you talked ill of Jewish people. It was deeply rooted in the way things were. And this is something we can think of. What are we okay with? This church is a Marienkirche, Church of St. Mary, where Luther preached often, and is an example of what was normal for Luther's time Christians. You see there's these towers. In one of the towers, there's this kind of a relief. There's a pig and a Jewish person looking in the behind of the pig, and then there are Jewish persons sucking the teeth of the pig. And then it says, makes mockery here of the name of the God. This was normal in medieval churches to have those kind of anti-Jewish images. And you think how many Christians went to worship under that image, never even thought twice. So what did modern Christians do as after the Holocaust, as people began to look at what is actually in our churches, in our communities that is offensive? People together with, this is a group of Jewish and Christian individuals who together deliberated what should they do with that particular image that is in Wittenberg, which is the holy Mecca for Lutherans. They decided to let it be. No cancel culture there, but let it be there as a reminder. And let's counter that with another memorial. It looks like flames coming out of under the plates, and it says a text here, something that in the name of our God, 6 million Jews died. So when you go there, you see both memorials, and it stops you. So when you think of Luther's and his contemporaries' attitudes towards the Jewish people and religion, you can already think that and see what fueled and enabled that, and then think fast forward to our world, that what is fueling and our attitudes and ways of relating to others. And this obviously leads us to think about the different manifestations of racism and xenophobia in our world, in our legislation, in our worship life, in our different ways of relating to one another. I guess we could ask, why are we like that? Haven't we learned anything? I do enough history to say we seem to have learned absolutely nothing. We continue to do hateful deeds towards one another. So what can we do? We can name the ignorance, false information, and we can name power, and then find ways we can we can cause interventions. And what is the role of religion in this? Let me see the time. Oopsie. I want to end here by saying something about Luther, but just showing that what I mentioned earlier about the hats. In Luther's world, people wanted to know how to identify for sure who is a Jewish person. It's like you want to know because you need to be worried about them. There could be different symbols, like here's the Judenringel on the cloaks, or people could have I don't know why this is fussing with me like this today. This kind of ringel is very close to how the Nazis wanted to identify Jews, and with different colors for homosexuals or Roma political prisoners. Jewish people were typically they had to live in different areas. This image is from Venice ghetto, where the word ghetto comes from, il ghetto. It refers to an area that's confined with mortar and rocks, and I forgot what the exact word for that is. But the word ghetto was not invented by Nazis. It was understood through the centuries as a place that is confined, and that is where Jewish people lived, which also made it a little bit safer to be a Jew in a community when you knew that this was a safer area than if you lived out in town. Of course, when we listen to these restrictions that were in place to keep Jewish people and Christians separate, there were always these real life stories. People went to Starbucks together, people fell in love, people were friends. But that's the undercurrent that we are just learning to learn more about. So very quickly, because we want to talk about Luther too, but Luther had no Jewish friends. Given what we just learned, it seemed really hard to have a friend who was a Jewish person if you were Christian, because you were not supposed to hang out. He had one friend, Bernard the convert, who had been a rabbi, converted to Christianity, was always broke. Luther loved Bernard. Bernard stayed at Luther's house, but Bernard was a convert and talked very ill things about Jewish religion. He wanted to convince his Christian friends how bad Judaism was and how good Christianity was. And that's another problem. Many of Luther's friends, they read sources from converts who wanted to prove how they love Christian faith more. So the sources were somewhat biased and tainted. So Luther's debate about the Jews was always kind of abstract and imaginary. But this we know that what we can imagine what would have happened knowing what we know about this man Luther, how he loved to eat and drink and hang out with people and how compassionate he was. When he's working with a person, it's like a different person, full of love. But when he's talking about the abstract other, his tone is different. He missed some chances to make Jewish friends, and he was obsessed with the Jewish religion and the Jews, I mean, as the way he used it, because he was an Old Testament professor too. And so he had a lot to lose there in case his reading of the Bible was wrong. Then everything he thought was wrong. If the Jewish religion practitioners were right, then anything Luther said about the Bible was compromised. And that's kind of hard. So we can understand that angle too. So typically when people talk about Luther and the Jews, they refer to these texts, the very end of his career and life, when he said some very negative things about what Christians should do about the Jewish people who practice Jewish religion, that they should really leave now, not to come back. But the story starts earlier, really. He always, throughout his career, writes about the Jewish religion, and his basic arguments never change. Don't ever believe it. People tell you that, oh, he changed his mind towards the end of life, he came crazy. No, he was really consistent. Christ has transformed his life. Christ gave him freedom, and that was such good news for him. He wanted to share that with others, and his proof was in the Bible and in his own life. To protect the gospel, he felt, challenge the Jewish religion, because if the Jewish religion was right, if Moses was right, then holy cow, why would anybody be Christian? And so we can understand, while we don't have to accept his words about what his solution was for this tension, that which one of us is right. Can we both be right? He was not 21st century person who could consider that different religions are right. In his world, only one religion can be right. So, and we see how he sought to interpret the scriptures from Christ's lens as a life-giving and liberating source. And he saw the Jewish religion as a threat to that. And this is my last slide. Just to be sure, I have not seen anywhere what I read from Luther that he would have ever said that one should harm Jewish people or take their property or persecute. But he did say in the end of his life that they really need to leave and find another place to live because they are a danger to us. So he wanted to eradicate the religion. And we are sorry that his sources were compromised and tainted. And he didn't have the chance we have to think of another way of the truth in our religion without saying that the other religions then have to be wrong. He didn't have enough conversation partners in that regard. He never danced at a Jewish wedding. So those are my slides, and I'm gonna now stop that and we can open up for conversation. Was that all new to you, or? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can definitely say that I have not really looked much into. Honestly, I haven't really thought about Luther as a man, like as an individual, for like a while. And so this was like really, really thought provoking and actually really, really like very interesting timing. I don't know about if anyone else has seen, but last like 2 weeks ago, ASMSU, which is the like the governing like body of campus at MSU, they initially voted like 2 weeks ago to support the International Holocaust Association's definition of anti-Semitism. And then last week they voted to take it back for reasons which are very complicated. A lot of like basically when this definition has been used in other places, it's led to a lot of like anti-Palestinian sentiments, and has stopped people from being able to have conversations about Zionism, and stopped people from. I think that like professors have lost tenure at other universities because of this implementation of that definition. So obviously it's a very nuanced discussion. And so I just thought it was really interesting that you're coming and talking to us right now when that just happened last week. So
Wow.
but thank you again for coming and talking. It's just really interesting. Just there's always just like so much othering other people in you know all points in time, and I think it's just right now in the world, like we have a lot more access to talking to other people, and so I think that it would be really interesting, even though you know some cases that doesn't necessarily change people's points of view, but it just makes me think about like what would Luther have, like would his thought processes have been different if he also included New Testament things in his thinking, or like if he was able to talk to more Jewish people too, just like how would his thought processes have changed?
Yeah. And that's the thing. He talks about the New Testament as if, oh, when I read Paul's letter to Romans and Galatians, everything changed. But then I went back to the Psalms, and he actually writes more about the Old Testament than the New Testament. And people typically think, oh, he's all about the New Testament. No, he really loved the Old Testament. But then the problem is that he read Old Testament through the lens of the New Testament, which has been fine for Christians for centuries, but it sort of no longer is just like that. You had to explain, why are you doing that? What is the meaning of that text for you and your community, and what you do with that? And whatever you do, well, as long as you, what we're trying to eradicate is the way Christians have interpreted both testaments as theirs, and that Christians have better reading. They have replaced the Jewish way of reading. And that was such an irritation for Luther, and that we are trying to name today, and not to be irritated, but celebrate, like, wow, we have Jews and Christians reading the Hebrew Bible, and we don't agree on everything how we read, and both religions are vibrant. What's going on here? clearly the text can take it. It's the people who are the problem. So, and my husband and I, we've been working on this for, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years. And whenever we go to talk about this, and some of our colleagues said, why do you dwell on this difficult topic? Pick up something sunny. I said, sunny is not fun. I mean, meaning people always get more animated and they find something to chew on, or like, oh, I see. It's almost like there's more interest in attending to the scriptures again when you lay out the problems of what we thought we knew about the Bible or what it means. And that's a very Lutheran way of reading, that we need to read it again and again, and everybody needs to read it. The more, the better. And we may find new ways to interpret the truths, what the truth might be, rather than say, we already figure out what this text means, and our reading is better than the other communities.